Good morning, everybody. So welcome to the last day of our offsites. Kind of bummed to be leaving and going back into the heat, but hey. So first off, I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So Jose Luis is going to lead us in the pledge. Everybody please stand. Thank you, Jose Luis. I appreciate it. I asked him last minute. I need roll call to start the meeting, and then I'm going to hand it off to our CEO.
Teresa Taylor.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
Controller Malia Cohen. Frank Rufino for Fiona Ma.
Present.
Lisa Middleton.
Present.
Lorena Ortega. Jose Luis Pacheco. Kevin Palke. Ramon Rubacava. Yvonne Walker. Melissa Willett. Dr. Gail Willis.
All right, thank you very much. Looks like we're all here. And I will state for the record, Malia is excused. And then we're going to move on here with Marcy Frost's opening, closing comments.
Comments generally. Thank you, President Taylor, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to begin today with an overview of our preliminary investment returns for the fiscal year that ended on June 30th. First, let's start with the total fund. As you know, we have a discount rate of 6.8%. That's the target that is set through the strategic asset allocation and through the asset liability management process. For the fiscal year that ended on June 30th, the total fund preliminary investment return was 5.8%. As we've talked about many times in these settings, the global economy does continue to remain unsettled. The challenges of domestic inflation and geopolitical conflicts, for example, continue to cause considerable volatility throughout the financial system. So give you a little bit of breakdown across the asset classes. The public equity asset class led the way, producing a preliminary return of 14%. We will talk a bit more about that in November. As Sterling Gunn indicated in his presentation, we have that mid-level review where we'll look at the strategic asset allocation once again. Private debt, we did establish that as a unique asset class, produced a 6.5% return. It did outperform its benchmark. So a big congratulations to Jean Sue and her team for getting that program up and running so successfully. We can give her a little applause. I talked to her last evening as she was out on her run. Private equity and real estate did see negative returns in the most recent data, while our fixed income returns were flat. Using these returns, I know a number that everyone pays attention to, the funded status stands at 72%. I do want to update the estimates of our long-term investment returns, which does provide the best picture of how we're doing relative to that 6.8% target. So the 10% investment return, or excuse me, the 10-year investment return stands at 7.1%. The 20-year return stands at 7%, and the 30-year return stands at 7.5%. As we know, our investment work is really about focusing capital on the long term. And so although we're pleased to see improvement relative in particular to last fiscal year, we know we still have quite a bit of work to do. The November agenda, as I mentioned, will take another look at that midterm asset allocation. Turning now to the agenda for the day. After some regular business items, we have two presentations planned for the morning. The first is an overview of the board's self-assessment survey. Travis Antoniono, an investment director for our sustainable investment teams, had a productive few days and some thoughtful discussions about the issues facing us. Also, I want to thank our stakeholders who traveled to be with us over the last 3 days. With that, I'll turn it back to you, President Taylor.
Thank you, Ms. Frost. I appreciate it. Before we move on to our action items, I also want to thank all of our staff that work so hard to help put these events together. You guys are awesome. Our board support staff, our folks, our event staff, I just wanted to call you guys out because you're always there for us. I just asked for some aspirin, and I think Kaylee went and got it for me. I'm like, oh, wow, thanks. Kaylee went and got it for me. I'm like, oh, wow, thanks. So I just want to thank everybody for working so hard to help the board have a successful event. And now I will move on to our first action item, the proposed decisions of the administrative law judges. And for that, I will call on our Vice President, David Miller.
Okay, thank you, President Taylor. I move to adopt all 4 proposed decisions at action items A through D with minor modifications argued by staff.
All right, motion by committee. Do we need seconds on that, Matt? Yes, we do. Okay. It's been made, motion's been made, seconded by Jose Luis Pacheco. On motion by committee, is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, I'm not seeing any discussion. I'm gonna, do we have to do a roll call? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion passes.
Okay. Next, I move to deny all 5 petitions for reconsideration at action items A through E.
All right. I need a second on that one. Mr. Palkey has made the second. On motion by committee, is there any discussion on that? All right. I'm seeing no discussion. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you very much. Motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Okay, I have one more action item, and then I think I'm going to stop there because I think we have some public comments that we need. We do not have any public comments. Never mind then. So our next action item is board travel approvals. I need a recommendation. Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Miller. Someone's point. Oh, we do have a public commenter. Okay, we'll get to you. So I have, it was moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Mr. Palkey. All those in favor of the board travel approvals say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. I'm going to go ahead and take, before we start our educational moments, I'm going to take my first commenter. Looks like it's Elnora. I don't think it's on.
Elnora Fretwell.
Thank you.
It's on now? Okay. Representing CSR, Executive Vice President statewide. I was going to wait till afterwards so I speak, but I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate you allowing us to speak and y'all hearing our concerns, because some things we spoke about, some of y'all came and talked to me about it, and some improvements been made, and you've been listening. So I do want to say thank you and appreciate that. I do understand when we do get up here and speak and talk, you can't make a decision just like that. I get that, why you don't say things, you have to go back and think about it. But like I said, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the votes that y'all did yesterday. And hopefully all the speakers that spoke and our members that spoke, you listen, you go back and you think about those things and things that you cannot do. When you come back, kind of let us know why, because sometimes people know why. They understand better without knowing why things happen. You know, I believe in that a lot, because you can change your mind and say, this is the reason why A, B, and C. And we say, okay, now we get it like that. But like I said, I just want to thank you for the opportunity. And I'm learning how to get up here and speak and talk, and I'm sorry if I try to talk twice in one day. I didn't know I couldn't. So I apologize for all my fumbleness that maybe I made. I will get better. Thank you.
Thank you, Elnora. We appreciate it. All right, so it looks like we are moving through the agenda quite quickly. CalPERS 2023 Board Self-Assessment, and I'm going to turn it over to Travis. Thank you very much, Travis.
Good morning, and thank you. Yeah, great to be here again with everyone today. Let's dive on into the CalPERS 2023 Board Self-Assessment. So the first thing I want to be able to get across is really the purpose of this presentation, and there's 3 primary components of it. You know, the first is to really understand the board self-assessment type of process and the requirements that are also bound by policy. It's also to review some of the outcomes from last time, the go around in 2021. And finally, it's to tee up the self-assessment process for the 2023, which all the board members will be part of. To dive into a little bit of the overview, the main bulk of the next few slides is going to be some screenshots of the policy itself. And we highlighted this just to be able to show that it is grounded within the policy, so this isn't something that is just applied loosely. There is the CalPERS board governance policy that definitively states what the expectations are of the board members and of this type of process. And likewise, I also want to be able to emphasize that not only is this board doing this, but it's also best practice for boards universally to be able to conduct some type of self-evaluation or process, a reflection of what's actually going on and what can actually improve over the time period that you serve. As we look at some of the different components here on segment B, one aspect that I do want to draw your attention to is the first bullet, that expert third-party facilitator to lead or co-lead the self-assessment process. This is something that we've done in the past and will continue to do, but at the same time, there's also components of 2, 3, and 4 that have been pursued as well, and likewise will be pursued again during this 2023 process. On segment D of the policy, it does state that an independent third party will assess board performance every 2 years. As I mentioned already, this was conducted back in 2021 and had previously been conducted in years past as well. But this will be a 2-year interval and following the guidelines of the policy itself. When we look back at the board self-assessment type of process, just a little bit of historical information. As mentioned, in 2021, a self-assessment process was followed. The expert external facilitator was NACD, and specifically it was led by Carrie Dominguez. We'll be able to share with you in due time who will be selected for the self-evaluation process again. It's currently under a procurement type of process right now. When you look at the 3 different components of the CalPERS board self-assessment process, it's really board assessments, it's committee assessments, and it's also director peer assessments. We'll be able to dive into each one of these 3. On the board assessments, this is more from a total board type of perspective. And the 2 aspects that are really going to be emphasized here are more on the competencies and alignment. And it's alignment to the priorities that board sets, on an ongoing type of basis. When you look at the committee assessments, it does follow a very similar type of process as far as what NACD has done in the past. But the main aspect is really to identify areas for enhancement and to assist committees in developing concrete action plans. So this is it's an opportunity for each of you to be able to have some self-reflection on what has worked in the past and also be able to devise some type of planning aspect of what can be improved. And likewise, I would also encourage the board members that will eventually be terming out to also have some type of self-evaluation and be honest of what can actually improve or what could have improved in the past to make your job easier and more effective as well. The 3 committees that we will be utilizing will be the Investment Committee, the Pension and Healthcare Benefits Committee, and also the Risk and Audit Committee. When we look at the director peer assessments, one way to kind of understand what will actually be going on is very similar to a 360 review, if anyone has gone through that type of process before. So you'll be working and submitting an evaluation of yourself as well as of your other peers. You'll also be meeting ultimately with the facilitator that will be able to assess what you're saying and be able to draw out some additional context that isn't necessarily always easy to be able to distill just from a checking the box or a written type of format. When we go back to 2021 and think about what was actually utilized, once again, NACD type of framework, but the NACD framework is composed of these 5 different characteristics: board structure, the operational oversight, strategy oversight, risk management and oversight, and then obviously the oversight of the CEO as well. Having looked at the 2021, some of you might recall that there were 2 main outcomes that are findings from the 2021 self-assessment process. One was more on establishing a process for a CEO succession planning, and the second one was further developing board member onboarding and education. When we look at the succession planning, there are a few different links that were actually provided that were ultimately also provided following the 2021 self-assessment. And these are each NACD type of links, different training, different exercises that could be assessed. This is a non-exhaustive type of list, and so for anything that you want to be able to dive into this go around in the 2023, I want to make sure that you emphasize whether or not you feel like you're getting adequate training within the training that has been provided in the past, and if there's something more specific that staff can be able to look into to provide as well. This is really an opportunity to be able to benefit each one of you. And that essentially really covered the onboarding and education aspect as well, which I just highlighted. As far as the timeline for the 2023 board self-assessment, as I mentioned, this is really teeing up the exercise right now, so no one is surprised of an inbox of emails saying that you have to go down through this type of process. This is a procurement type of stage right now in June through August, where we're going to be able to sign off on everything. Once that occurs over the next month or two, then you should be expecting some sort of email and some type of contact within early September, or most likely even late August instead. During the September through the November type of time frame, there will be one-on-one interviews that will be conducted with the external facilitator. And likewise, you'll also have the expectation to be able to submit and fill out the forms required. As we transition more towards November 2023, that's when the external consultant will be able to evaluate all the different findings. They'll be able to tease different findings out through the one-on-one type of process as well. And then in late November, this information will ultimately be provided to the chair. We'll take that information and then we'll come back in January of 2024, and that's the opportunity for the whole board to be able to reflect on these type of findings. And so hopefully at that time, then you'll be able to decide what action items you want to actually do based upon these findings as well, whether it be work streams, whether it be something else. So that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any type of questions, and for any type of questions that we're not able to fully address right now, we'll be able to dive in further and follow up with you. And once again, I do want to also just acknowledge and really appreciate Christina, who is sitting right behind here, just for her assistance on this presentation, as well as all the work that her and her staff do behind the scenes to be able to make this actually come to light.
Yes, our board support services unit is awesome. I have all good things to say always about them. I'm not seeing the board yet, but I do have a couple of questions if you don't mind, Travis.
Absolutely.
So as we do our whoopsie, I'm trying to move this along. As we do our self-assessment, and we're looking, the committee one is where I was, could you delve a little deeper in what, I don't know if you've seen the questions, what we're looking at. Part of the reason I'm asking is because as I look at committees, I remember doing the self-assessments, right? I don't remember specifically what we did with the committees the last time, how we did answer those questions. And what the questions were. So I'm just having a blank moment probably, but if you could kind of give us an idea of what that entails.
It follows a very similar type of process to
Okay.
the total board aspect. So if there isn't a memory of, how to distinguish it, it's probably for a good reason, because there probably wasn't much distinguishment between the committees and the total board evaluation.
Okay,
So
so
it's
it's-
really just to hone in on that individual committee and
With the same questions?
with
Oh, maybe
very
that's why I don't
yeah,
remember.
exactly.
Okay, okay.
But we will let you know if the external consultant that is chosen advises of different questions
Okay.
than the total board as well.
And are we gonna see Carrie? Or is she gonna be the one
Well,
contacting us?
well, we're in a procurement type of stage right now. And
Oh,
so,
I'm sorry, I thought we already had,
So the contract, a contract isn't signed as of yet.
I got it. I did not realize that. Because we have such a long history with NACD, I just was a little surprised. All right, anybody else have any questions on, Mr. Pacheco? Go ahead.
Thank you so much for this information. Good morning. Sorry, it's not. Again, I have to bring this closer to me. Now, can you hear me? Okay, Travis. Thank you, Travis, for this incredible information. I wanted to kind of go into the resources on the summary of the 2021 board self-assessment and outlooks. Specifically, the board oversight, CEO performance, and succession planning. And what I did was I did go through some of those links, and I actually put together a binder that helped me kind of understanding the process and everything. With respect to and it's very exhaustive. The resources there are incredible. But is there a way to, kind of give us the essentials, like focus on the essentials for us so that we know which ones are the ones that we should focus on? Because it's a very exhaustive list of material. I was able to kind of sense which ones were important, but it would be kind of good if staff could help us kind of guide us, because it would give us a pathway on knowing which materials we should focus on and how we should proceed and move in, especially for some of these links to CEO evaluation and succession and the process. So I don't know if that's something that can be done within the timeline, or.
It can be done, and additionally, I think the one thing that was just trying to be careful of not influencing and making sure that there is a full amount, but at the same time, I think there could be some type of luck from the staff type of level, and trying to just provide some type of summary or insight into which areas might be of more interest for you.
Oh, no, I wasn't saying influencing it, just providing us, because
Yeah.
there's hundreds of links.
Absolutely,
and
it can be
it's-
overwhelming. Yeah.
It is overwhelming, so I've just maybe there's some best practices on which ones are the ones we should, steps in going about it, that could, maybe that the organization, the NACD, could do that as well. So, and I just wanted to bring that up to your attention. And then other thing was, let me see. And then in terms of the director peer assessment, now you mentioned it's in the previous past that has been a 360. Has that been like a 360? We each of us are evaluating each other. Can you elaborate a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so it is similar to a 360 review. There will be questions on each individual, and then there'll be an opportunity to opine or provide some type of reflection, including text as well, on certain strengths or weaknesses or areas of improvement. So this is something that is confidential. It is something that it's supposed to be a safe spot to be able to reflect on each other.
And that's what I was gonna. Thank you for bringing. It was gonna be confidential.
And there's also a process, an internal control process that we've also discussed to be able to limit other type of risks that might be involved too.
Okay, very good then. And that's about it for right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Travis. Thanks, Mr. Pacheco. Anybody else? Questions before we move on? Okay, doesn't look like it. I grabbed one of those links and looked it up, and then already I'm reading the CEO succession planning, so excellent. As we move on, I guess I'm going to thank you for your great presentation. We appreciate it. This was a informational item. And when do we come back with the?
January
January?
2024. So
Okay.
look forward to seeing you all again soon. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll see us even before January, so.
Absolutely. I hope so.
All right, so now we are on I don't have Anything for breaks or anything? So I don't know, 10 a.m. stakeholder perception survey results.
We can do it between open and close.
Okay. Oh, yeah,
We can do it between that.
because we'll be done after this. And we're a half an hour early. Thanks, Brad. Thank you very much for doing this, and take it away.
Thanks, President Taylor, and good morning, board members. Brad Pacheco, CalPERS team. I know it's been a long 2.5 days, and we're the last presentation, so we'll try to keep it interesting. So we're pleased to be here to share with you the results and findings of our 2023 Stakeholder Perception Survey. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our guests before we get started. Joining me is Ian Stewart, who is a senior principal at EMC Research. EMC is based in Oakland, California, although we were talking, I guess companies are not really based anywhere these days. Ian's out of Seattle, Washington. And EMC provides a wide range of services, research services, including political research, brand positioning, and customer satisfaction surveys. They serve a number of clients, including cities and counties in California, other state agencies, and labor groups like SEIU. This year, we added live focus groups to our survey work, and EMC conducted those for us. So I'll get into a little bit more detail about the focus groups later in the presentation, and Ian will share his findings. For those board members that are new to this survey, its purpose is to gauge the overall sentiment of CalPERS, how we're doing from various segments of our stakeholder universe. And our goal is to get a sense of trends over time so we can adjust our outreach and communication efforts and focus accordingly. We administer the survey once a year online, and the analysis is done by our partners in our policy research and data analytics division that reports into Doug Hoffner. And we've been conducting the survey for at least a decade, so that gives us some trend data over time. So these are the groups we survey. We randomly send the survey to a subset of active and retired members. We also send it to a defined list of stakeholders that we maintain internally. And this includes employer senior leaders. So when you think about these individuals, it would be your finance directors, city managers, and HR directors. We also send it to employees or team members within our employers at the operational level. And these really are the folks that are doing the day-to-day interactions with CalPERS, like reporting payroll or enrolling a new employee in healthcare. And then finally, our stakeholder leaders. Many of these individuals that attend our board meetings on a regular basis, they're either here in the room today or watching the webcasts. These would be the leaders that represent our active and retired members and those that advocate on behalf of our employers. So our overall response rate was nearly 6%, which our partners in PRDA consider statistically significant. Not surprisingly, our stakeholder leaders, who are very actively engaged with us, had the highest response rate at 41%, followed by our retiree community at 17%. I think it's important to keep in mind that the results of this survey are really a snapshot in time. And there are many factors that influence people's opinions about CalPERS. So we find it helpful to reflect on the environment when people were receiving and taking the survey. And in this case, that was between February and March of this year. So just a few points here. The last reported investment performance from CalPERS at that time was a minus 7.5%. We did have the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank and other regional banks. ESG was being widely discussed in the financial markets and by political parties at all levels. There were renewed calls for divestment of fossil fuels in the California legislature, and as it was discussed on Monday, there were news reports about how other institutional investors were addressing fossil fuels in their portfolio. Inflation was rising, but that did result in increased COLAs for our retirees. The world was beginning to return to some sense of normality, and for CalPERS, we had been back in the office for about a year on our hybrid schedule. And of course, as Marcy mentioned earlier, we had geopolitical conflict, a low return environment, and some uncertainty around the direction of the economy. Just a quick word on the structure of the survey and some changes that we introduced this year. As I said, it's an online survey. There are 19 questions. There are 8 long-term trend questions, as we call them, where respondents are asked to answer yes or no. A couple of examples of those questions: is CalPERS being managed well? Is CalPERS sensitive to the needs of its members? Then there are 8 perception statements that are asked on a scale of strongly agree to strongly disagree. And a couple of examples of those: CalPERS is effective in communicating with our stakeholders, and CalPERS operates ethically as an organization. And then finally, we have added 3 questions to give us a sense of how often a member or an employer engages with us. So we added 2 new elements to the survey this year to better understand the sentiments of our stakeholders. When respondents answered the 8 long-term trend questions, they were invited to provide comments as to why they answered yes or no. And as I mentioned earlier, Ian and his team at EMC Research conducted focus groups to help us tease out even more the views of our stakeholders. So on to the results. The good news is the overall perception of CalPERS remains positive among our stakeholder groups. 85% of the respondents answered yes to the long-term trend questions, and this is a slight uptick from 83% last year. Some of the other key findings is is customer service being managed well? That was 89% said yes, and it was the leading question of the 8 long-term questions. Last year, the highest response was CalPERS is being managed well. Confidence in retirement and security and the balance of cost and quality of healthcare offerings received low ratings, but it did not change from last year, and this is not surprising given the trajectory of healthcare rates in recent years in our discussions yesterday. The highest overall favorability came from our retired members, and the second highest came from our active members. And employers, senior leaders, and this is a trend that you will see, and it's something that we've seen every year, they have the least favorable responses, and they're often the individuals, as I mentioned, that are having to make the tough decisions around pension costs and budgets, and so it's not surprising that there are some, with the rising cost of pensions, some unfavorable responses. This is a quick view of the long-term trend questions. This is a combination of both active and retired members. And the good news here is all but one question increased over last year. But I think what's important to take away from this slide is while we've seen some increases and decreases in recent years, we are in a much better position in terms of sentiment than we were 10 years ago. This slide shows the employer responses to the same questions. This is a combination of both the senior leaders and those team members at the operational level within our employers. And again, mainly increases or no changes from last year. There is, for some of the newer board members, you probably see that see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over from the left, kind of a big chasm drop there around confidence in the retirement system. And I'll just point out that's when we changed the discount rate from 7.5% to 7%. So we did see a drop there during that year. And then here's the final group we want to call out. It's our stakeholder leader group. Again, these are the leaders and the representatives of our member associations, retiree groups, and employer associations. You also see there aren't as many columns in each of these clusters. That's because when we started this survey, we actually used to interview the stakeholder leaders either in person or by phone. So it was a much more qualitative measure rather than a quantitative. So here the results are split, with half the questions seeing increases and the other half seeing decreases. I'll note that this is a small sample of individuals. It's just under 300 people, so one change in their sentiment over a year can have a great impact on the results of this. But nevertheless, we watch these closely and take into account the important relationship that we have with these partners. Respondents were able to identify whether they were management versus non-management, and this is just a view of the visual breakdown of how they responded yes to the same questions we're reviewing. And again, the gray bar indicates the management lower favorable ratings, largely due to the issues that they have to grapple with on a daily basis. And then quickly, this is just a view of the respondents by employer type. So these would be actually members who had indicated that they work for a school employer, state worker, or public agency. And you'll see with school employees being the most satisfied with CalPERS, followed by state and public agency members. So as I mentioned, we did add the ability to provide comments, and our partners in PRADA, they reviewed over 2,400 comments that were given in the survey. We limited the review to comments where the answer to the question, the 8 long-term trend questions, was no. So if a member answered no to the question, is CalPERS being managed well, and they provided a comment, that we included in our analysis. So these are a summary of those comments. Letting politics creep into our investment decisions was a concern, particularly our ESG work. Of course, these are just the sentiments of what people are feeling, reading, or thinking about CalPERS, not necessarily fact, but this is one of the concerns they had. Some inconsistencies with customer service. So at times, receiving 2 different answers to the same question was noted. But I'll talk about some of the action steps that we're doing to try to address that a little later to help out our customer contact center. There was a sentiment for more pre-retirement education. So we do currently have a retirement checklist on our website that we provide our members. But it is something that we provide for those people that are looking at retirement in a year. And I think there's a desire for us to provide more pre-retirement education at different career levels. Someone that's just joined the system, someone that may be halfway through their career. So that's something that we'll look at. Again, finding information on our website was a topic, and I'll address this later in our next steps, and I know we heard a little bit about that this week. Contact center wait times, and of course, healthcare costs, and if they were a member of our long-term care program, there was unhappiness expressed with the situation at the time of the survey.
Brad,
So-
this
Yes.
slide has a comment, if you don't mind, from
Yes,
Ms.
please.
Walker.
No, just one question, Brad.
Yes.
When you started out, you said that comments are from what? Say it again.
So the 8 long-term trend questions
Uh-huh.
that I was reviewing, if the member answered no to that question. So for example, if CalPERS is being managed well and they said no, and they provided a comment as to why they believe that, that's the analysis of this.
And so did we capture any, like if they said it was yes, did we and they put comments in, did we capture any of those? I just hesitate to only take
Yeah.
negative comments.
No, I appreciate that. And we focused on the no because that's where we would see some improvement. But we did capture the yes, and our team members in Prada did look at the yes statements. And of course, they reflect the sentiment of, yes, CalPERS is being managed well. We had comments around great customer service. On the flip side, we had people that were happy that we were addressing ESG. So, of course, you're going to have two different types of members. But we do have that data.
Yeah,
And
it
it was-
would just be nice to see too. I mean, not the generic ones that, you would imagine, but if there were some a little more telling, because then I think it's important for the board to know where people think that we're, so we know where to, if we need to, do more of something,
Sure.
because it had an impact.
Yes, no, thank you. And memory serves me correct, there were about 1,700 comments provided with yes statements. So that's a summary that we can provide to the board. So I'm going to pause here and ask Ian to discuss the results of the focus groups, and then we'll get back into the action
Well,
steps.
I got a question
Yes.
from Mr. Pacheco, so if you don't mind.
Yeah, so it's exactly, well, it's on the same thing here, and I was just, I actually, I do appreciate this list, but I was wondering if there was a way to visualize it for us, I think there's a process called a word cloud that would have shown us like, okay, is ESG the big one that's coming out, or is it the website, or is it long-term care? Kind of visualizing which ones are standing out as more pronounced versus the ones that have been had in a few comments. It would kind of give us an understanding of a visual of how things look. And for me, I'm a visual person, so I feel that's, but I don't know if that's something that can be done as in a later time, or is that something that could be evolved?
I'm being told it can be done over here, so.
Yes, yeah, we happy to do that. And I should have noted, this list is in no particular order, but I understand what you're asking for, Mr. Pacheco, is really just to understand, where there's more significance in some of these issues.
Yeah, that would be very, very helpful
Okay,
for
yeah.
the board. Thank you so much.
We'll follow up with that.
Thank you.
And
Would you consider, just a quick question,
Yes.
because I hear it too from my members sometimes, and then sometimes I hear the exact opposite. So long wait times, I always hear healthcare costs, but the customer service inconsistencies, those two things, long wait lines, customer service inconsistencies, I'm wondering how many, that's something that we should be concerned about, right? And if we could see better how many that is, the open-ended comments, how many people said no, no, or had a
Yes.
bad response, and then what were their comments? Maybe we should see those so that we can see what improvements need to be made. Anecdotally, I know I have members who tell me this, but it's like one or two here and there, so I don't know.
right, no, understood. And I think what Mr. Pacheco is asking for is, can tease that out as to really how many of these comments addressed inconsistencies over, let's just say, politics or ESG.
Right.
Yeah,
That was a different scenario, but anyway,
sure.
I think,
Teresa,
there you go.
just on the wait times and some of the things that people might comment on, there's then objective data to compare it to, because it seems like you can have a bad experience with customer service on one particular day, and it really is not representative. Yeah, so it does feel like with some of the issues that look like maybe there's a trend or whatever, it's then comparing that to the actual data that we measure so that we get a full picture of, this particular sample size was negative or whatever, but.
Customer service inconsistencies can be very subjective,
Yeah.
right? So that's a different thing, but long wait times, we should have data.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. And as I mentioned, to Arena's point, this is a snapshot in time. And I think some of these trends will reveal themselves in the work that EMC Research has done. So I'll turn it over to Ian.
Thank you. Once again, Ian Stewart, Senior Principal with EMC Research. We are a public opinion research company, and so we do some of this kind of work you were just talking about. And I think the focus groups will give you some insight into what people are saying. Focus groups are a way to hear what people have to say in their own words in a longer format. In a survey, you get a yes/no. In a focus group, you get a long, extended conversation among a variety of groups. So I'll walk you through this. Feel free to ask me questions as we go along. We did 4 90-minute focus groups. That's the standard in the industry, about 90 minutes. And there were a variety of CalPERS members, all online. You'd be surprised. We used to do these in person, but online is revealing a lot of interesting trends where people seem to be more forthcoming when they're in the comfort of their own home on a Zoom session. We did a series of questions in this survey. It goes in a progression of assuming very little, and then we get more and more details and asking questions along the way. But really, it's a conversation of the participants to tell them and us what they think. So we engage them on a variety of issues you just heard in the survey. There are quotes throughout this presentation. It's a very quote-driven presentation. So you'll see a topic at the top, and you'll see member quotes that we've pulled out, and we have a lot more of those. We have the entire transcript that are anonymized, so you won't know who said what, but you'll see what they said. So if you're really curious, you can read the entire thing and understand what's happening there. The colors here are for retired members, active members, employer operations staff, including those that are administering benefits for employees, and employer senior leaders. The same for -1 category that you just saw a few minutes ago, all with that color coding to understand what they said. I moderated all 4 of these groups, so I was in each session. I can tell you more about what people said if you have questions. So I want to give you some key findings first. Remember, focus groups are qualitative, they're not quantitative, so we're not really counting noses. But we heard high satisfaction levels reflected throughout all of our focus groups that you saw in the survey. We repeatedly heard that satisfaction with CalPERS benefits from members, especially the retired members. We heard a lot of that. CalPERS benefits continue to be a really strong driver of attracting and returning personnel. We heard comments about these benefits are great, they made me come here, they're making me stay here. Clearly a strong driver. There's a really high level of confidence among members about the stability of CalPERS. When you look at concerns about future benefits, it's mostly tied to a perception that politics are going to mess with benefits somehow. Either the state's going to come in and take this away for some reason because it's such a robust fund, or there's some unforeseen economic event, a giant recession, something else that can't be predicted. So when you see the no, I'm not confident, a lot of this is reflected in, I can't predict the future. How do I know what's really going to happen? Can anyone really promise me that this is going to be there when I retire? The confidence combined with the consistent performance of CalPERS is a really key driver of low election engagement. This is one of the questions we asked in the survey. Members don't see a lot of reason to get involved because they're saying, things are great. I keep getting good returns. CalPERS seems stable. I don't really know financial analysis that well. What possible opinion could I offer to that? So that's one of the reasons why they say everything's fine. I don't need to get involved. Retired members are one exception to this. They're really a lot more engaged. When we ask about elections, almost all of them said, yep, I participated. I'm going to keep participating. They're really interested because of the COLA adjustments. They are paying a lot of attention to that. So they're heavily invested in the discussion of what's happening at this meeting. I'm sure there's a lot more retired members watching today than any other class. We actually did hear a lot of praise for CalPERS customer service. The employers, senior leaders, and operations staff did express frustration with response times, needing to make multiple calls to address issues and repeat what was said at the previous call. This was a consistent pain point. They say, I'd have this long conversation, we'd get somewhere, we'd have to stop because we couldn't figure it out, then I have to call back and start all over again. I can't talk to the same person. So I have to repeat my entire story from the beginning. They also noted to us that there's some specific and unique situations that face particular agencies. So they said, if you could have a team that deals with this kind of issue or that kind of issue, they mentioned a couple of places where you're already doing this, and I'm sure that you could speak to this, but that would be a great improvement for them to say, my agency keeps having this same issue, and there are probably 7 other ones that do as well. So if you had a team that was able to deal with those issues, we would have people knowledgeable rather than just calling it the general line and saying, how do we find the right person to help me, and them not knowing what to do. Employer senior leaders' biggest concern, operations staff share this a bit, is the long-term cost of employee benefits for the classic and public safety members. They worry about those obligations in the long term for their agencies. They're not so much worried about CalPERS specifically. But what they said to us over and over again is this trend is really, they feel is unsustainable. They said, they don't know how they're going to keep up. I know this is a consistent concern. It's not like this is the first time you've heard this, but they said these costs keep falling on us, and CalPERS doesn't seem to really care about it. Now, they also said CalPERS doesn't have to care about it, but it's an interesting dynamic, and that's what when they say, I'm worried about CalPERS in the future. They're talking about their own performance, their own agencies and cities. Okay, so at the top here you see the headline, high satisfaction with CalPERS and benefits. You'll see the color-coded responses for some of the open ends, from some of the comments that people gave us. These are direct quotes from members. In pretty much every group, we heard high levels of satisfaction with CalPERS, the benefits, and the responsiveness to questions. So generally, customer service is good. And then there's interesting, a lot of people who were investing other retirement accounts said CalPERS often gets better returns. They said, how can I copy what CalPERS is doing? I'd love to know what you're doing so I can copy that and beat the S&P 500 as well. Yeah, but they were interested in that. A lot of members were not aware that CalPERS administered their health benefits. They were pretty clueless about that question. But members were confident that CalPERS offers better benefits, and the access to these benefits is a really big perk for active members. It really positively influences the employee decision to join public service. You can see the quote there at the bottom. We heard this quite a few times among active members, saying, look, I was looking around, these benefits were just outstanding, and they continue to be outstanding, and that's one of the reasons I stay here. The question of CalPERS stability and benefit payments is, the threat is kind of really a hypothetical threat. So I talked about this a few minutes ago. Pretty much all members in any of these four groups said, I think CalPERS benefits and investments are stable. Yes, I'm confident that it's going to be there when I retire. What's your confidence level? And that quote on the right, it's extremely high. I'm way more confident in CalPERS than Social Security. Others chimed in repeatedly saying, yeah, I'm very confident it's going to be there. So where are these concerns coming from? It's really things that are outside of CalPERS control. So that quote on the lower left, yeah, that's lower left to you. In 30 years, what's going to happen in 30 years? No one can predict that. How can you tell me that my retirement is going to be safe? Now, I do believe you that it's going to be safe, but talk to me in 30 years. That's a long time. On the other side there, this question of withstanding politics, and this came into account a couple different ways. One was we're making investment decisions that are driven by politics, not by the highest returns we can make. And the other side of that is politics are creeping into this. How can I be sure with all the other insanity happening in this country right now that my retirement system is really safe from politics? You can't guarantee that to me. So you can see how these are hypothetical concerns. They're out there and they exist, but they're not direct threats. They're not saying, I feel like CalPERS is going to collapse tomorrow. We talked a few minutes ago about contribution sustainability. So senior employers and operations staff were the ones that brought this up the most. They talked about the concerns being able to cover the costs of their member agencies, and they're struggling to keep up. I think you know this. You've heard this before. They really do feel like PEPRA is helping, but the long-term financial commitments for them are not sustainable. There's a variety of quotes here, mostly from senior employers, which you'll also note was one of the lowest satisfaction groups, right? On the left, I think this was a really interesting quote. I don't think CalPERS feels like they need to be fixed. And then this quote continues to say, we keep picking up the costs here, and we need to find some way to minimize these because I have to keep paying, and I don't know if we can keep up. I can either increase taxes or cut services, and I'm kind of running out of runway to do that. And then there's some more quotes about where the costs are going. If I'm doing this, then 70% of that is going to retirement. The operations staff quote here, city bankruptcy isn't a CalPERS issue, but we're talking about retirement being in jeopardy here. And the bottom one there talks about PEPRA specifically and says it's helping, but we haven't really seen the results in that way. So you can get a sense now, when you see that lower satisfaction level and concerns, this is what's driving it. Moving on, when we talk about employer engagement and communication with CalPERS, lots of positive experiences with operations employees, a specific group that we talked to, with CalPERS staff, lots of positives to say, but senior employers did note some inconsistency in answers they receive on the human resources side. So the first one is a really positive quote on the far left there, the operations staff saying, yeah, they get back to me really quickly, they tell me what's going on within a day. And then on the other side, look at the end of that quote from the senior employer. We say in the HR world, you call PERS 3 times to see if you get the same answer twice. So they're seeing inconsistent answers, and they're talking about that within their own staff. We'll call back again. Maybe you'll get a different answer this time. And then this last one starts to get into some of the solutions that you could be offering. I like that we have a dedicated employer response team for complicated questions. So this talks about that specific team that I mentioned a few minutes ago. This seems to be really useful to a lot of the operations staff. The senior employers then talked about the depth of information available on the website, and then they expressed that maybe there's some, and this comes up later, the enhancements to the system have been great. So the website was lauded all over the place. This is great. I really like what we're able to do here. And I like that you streamline your systems. It does come up again as an opportunity for sharing among the operations staff, and I'll show you what that means in a few minutes. So we talked about elections a few minutes ago, and I mentioned to you what sort of drives this low election participation. Retirees were the group that expressed the most engagement in elections, the most interest, and they're really interested in protecting their retirement investments. They start to pay attention to that, and they really do pay attention to the candidate guides, the forum videos. Pretty much no other group. Of all the 4 groups we talked to, retirees are the only ones to really mention this. The non-retired participants basically said, I'm confident CalPERS is doing what it's doing. They have a solid track record. I feel confident. Why would I bother to get involved? They seem to know what they're doing. I don't know any better than them. Why would I vote in this election? So that's what they talk about. A senior employer told us, well, I could vote for somebody, but it's just one vote. Why would that really change anything? So I'm not going to get involved either. We then did a little section on ranked choice voting versus the current majority. There wasn't really a clear-cut picture, although there was a recognition that ranked choice voting could be a cost-saving measure. So now we're getting into some of the suggestions here. We talked about resources for members with a positive. Here's some of the suggestions that we heard from people. We heard the website and digital presence were all positive, and the retirement planning tools are good, but it's hard to find them. So in terms of central availability, this quote from the active member I think really sums it up well. There's lots of resources, but it took me a long time to find where they were. They were kind of spread throughout the website. And if there was one place that I could find them, this was a constant theme of sort of, I need some help figuring this out. There's a lot to really take in. How do I do that? And then the active and retired members wanted to learn more about how CalPERS is investing. They said, I'm interested in that. Again, this is mostly retired that we're saying this. They'd love to know more about potential changes to understand the impact of what they're investing in, and also so they could sort of copy you and do what you're doing in their own retirement accounts. Here's a collection of suggestions from both active and retired members. The retired members there in the blue, the active members in the red. What are some other things they said to us that they would see as improvements? The retired members, they talked about buying additional service credits, which I know has at times been a thing. More straightforward ways to access information. Links to the website, they talked about other ways that we might be able to get that information to them. Information about how CalPERS is making those investment decisions, mostly so they could copy you. Workshops to help navigate Medicare or CalPERS health insurance parts in retirement. There was some confusion about how do I do that. Among active members, they talked about sort of short webinars, like 15 to 20-minute sessions where they might be able to understand what's happening with benefits or enrollment. Education investments, we talked about that a few minutes ago in the presentation. Information about healthcare and communication topics about elections. I'm not sure they're going to participate even if they hear about it, but they did say to us they'd like to hear about it. For employers, we talked about this a few minutes ago. Operations staff and senior employers said CalPERS has great representatives that are directly engaging with the organization, especially with potential pension changes. The operations staff were more likely to say that attended a conference, but said, I would love to get sort of snippets of things. I would love to get a 15 to 20-minute session because I was there for the whole time. And it's hard for me to get away for an entire day to do this. I'd love to have more bite-sized ways to get this kind of training. And then they also mentioned we'd love to be able to share knowledge with each other. So I know things that you don't know. If I shared that, you're going to be more efficient in your relationship with CalPERS. So I'd love to find some forum for us to be able to do that, rather than a lecture and trainer-led instruction. They're looking for, I don't know what that looks like in this day and age. I think forums are still a thing, but that's one place that they said they would love to share information with each other. We did talk about this a few minutes ago. The operations staff talked about ways to streamline things. So they talked about response times for time-sensitive issues like healthcare coverage earlier. So that's one of the key issues that we find, a response time issue that we're trying to get this member set up, and we just can't figure it out. They talked about, I mentioned this earlier, teams that are trained to work on specific issues. The quote here is subject matter experts. More of that feels like a benefit to them. Be more efficient to say, yes, I can talk to somebody in this team or that team that specifically knows this complex issue that we're dealing with. This question of uploading more secure upload options, there was this discussion of why are we still faxing things? I don't get it. Why do we have to keep faxing things in? There's a way to do secure digital uploads now. Can we not do that these days as a way to reduce the data entry costs? And then this short online trainings I talked about, right, a 15, 20-minute opportunity instead of an entire day of training. They looked at that as a great way to enhance training for them. For senior employers, most of this was about the rising costs. And so they said, yes, I'd also like a dedicated member representative on specific topics to deal with classic and public safety members that are eating up their budgets. So you can see here that first quote there, a designated representative to talk to with our relationship. And then the last one is change your processes, CalPERS, whatever you need to do down on top of your books, you can catch these things when it's relevant so we can deal with it. Instead of, this person went here is 1986, and now I have to backdate all of my payments to them. It doesn't feel fair to me. There should be some kind of statute of limitations in this. I don't quite understand the complexity here of what they're talking about, but clearly it's relating to their responsibility to this member. And their concern is, I've been paying this for a long time, and now all of a sudden I have to pay a very different amount. And I didn't really have any chance to deal with that, and now I've got to deal with the consequences. So that's a rundown of my results. We talked about there are transcripts available in case you're interested in more quotes here, but hopefully that fills in a lot of the questions that we were talking about a few minutes ago from the survey results. I'd be happy to take your questions if you have them.
So many questions. This was absolutely excellent. The whole time I've been here, I don't think we had anything that has drilled down this far. I think I saw two things that were really very consistent. Even the members want to be able to call in and not have a different rep and explain their story all over again, which creates a bureaucratic quagmire. And it happens at my agency too, just FYI. And so do the employers. So it sounds like that might be something we may want to look at. There's just so much information here. I think that it gives us an opportunity to kind of review and see what staff thinks and what they want to do. But I'm very impressed with all the information. Feels like people were very comfortable giving their opinions on this, so I'm really happy with that. What was the last one? The consistency, we can actually deal with it instead. This person was here in '86 and now I have to pay for him. That doesn't feel fair. I think that was a recent change in a law. But yeah, I would like to just sort of sit with this for a while. I think it's a lot of great information. Anybody else?
Thank you. I really appreciate the report, and I appreciate the point. What I thought was very intriguing to me is how retirement security, the way it was faced, has the lowest, but it's still almost 80%. So it's, we have to figure out how to say that positively. But still, 80%, even though it's high, I am worried that it's not 100%, because how can you not think that your retirement's going to be there? I mean, what I always tell active members is your retirement is more secure than your job, which is true. You can get laid off and all that. The other concern is this whole thing about, which I can understand, the balance between healthcare costs and quality, and that's always going to be a challenge to make sure we educate people on it. But the one I really want to talk about is from the employer point of view, is this whole thing about what they claim is the unpredictability of their costs, But if you look at it as an employer contribution, I'm looking at the valuation report for this county, Montgomery County, and there's a projection, so it doesn't go all the way out, but it's 10 lower. And with PEPRA, they all mention PEPRA, that should go down. And I know, I guess we don't have it, but I don't know if Wisconsin, yes, Wisconsin. Anyway, I know in the 37 counties, they have in their projections, they have a curve, and you can see when they project everything's going to be paid off, or at least it steeps down a lot. And maybe that's because they have, they have a horizons that's defined in the 30 years or 17, and they have to figure out whether they're going to reset or not. So I'm wondering if we've ever done those kind of projections. I know it's been multi-agencies, multi-employers, but is there any way we can do something like that? I don't know.
We'll see if Scott wants to add on, but Ramon, we do have that type of data available. We've shared that through employer webinars. I think that's the reason that you're getting the comments about the relief of the PEPRA costs coming in, is because they've seen that chart, and where the PEPRA liabilities start to come into the costs, you see that deep, dive on costs. But the concern, and we hear this regularly when we're meeting with stakeholders employers in particular, it's the unfunded liability cost, not the normal cost of the plan, that they're most concerned about. So, for example, anytime we don't hit that 6.8%
Right.
return, that gap between that delta gets added over to the unfunded liability, and then they're paying us 6.8% on top of that dollar amount. So that's where the concern is, and I think that's why they also want to know a little more about how we're investing, the politics around ESG, coming in thinking that somehow we're losing return because we're too focused on ESG and we're doing trade-offs of which we are not. I'll be very clear about that. But we do have that information. And I think, Michelle, Nick showed you that transparency report. And I think we could add that chart into that transparency report.
That would be nice. And the other thing, when I do talk to employers is, the other thing they're concerned about, most of our plans are now mature plans, and this whole thing about the ratio between retirees and people who are still contributing. But a lot of it is also that the payroll is shrinking, and not dollar amount, the number of paid positions. So there's so many vacancies. If they start hiring, the ratio would improve, and there'll be more consistent contributions, and good things would happen. So we should ask our employers to hire.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's Scott.
So, next is, Lisa, I had one real quick thing. I think it's interesting that this has come up because politics has actually intervened itself, and so now we're being accused of playing politics, even though the politics is what has started this conversation about ESG, that we've been under the radar for, 20 years, and suddenly the politics of it we're playing, we're changing all of our, but there was another one where where it said we caved to politics, and I thought it was a very odd statement.
That one on the bottom right?
Yeah, and it was a retired member, and I don't know exactly that specific thing withstand a lot, but the fact that they were willing to cave politically in our return of investments because of the optics, do they mean our rate of return? Anyway, I don't know what that means. Does anybody know what that means?
To my recollection, yes, that they're talking about the rate of return. They're
So
saying that we could be getting higher rates of return if we hadn't made one of those investment choices.
Oh, an investment choice based on ESG? No, we don't, yeah. Well, those we don't have a choice in. A lot of times. Yeah, tobacco, I wasn't here.
Politics comes in two ways. This is one way that it comes in, but again, we can't think about this and apply it to every member, right?
Right, no, it's more members that are more politically.
The flip side is politically, this CalPERS as a fund is a really attractive amount of money. It's huge, right? And so
Sure.
the second side of politics is how can you be sure that the state's not going to need some help at some point? They don't necessarily understand the boundaries between these two, but that's the other side of this politics.
I got it. Okay, thank you. I was really questioning that particular thing because I was like, what are they talking about?
Yeah, it really is. In many of their views, CalPERS is get me the best returns you possibly can, and anything that doesn't do that, right, is a political decision.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, Lisa.
All right, thank you. More comments than questions, but the PEPRA discussion is one that is really important for employers, and to the extent that we can document the impact of PEPRA is going to be of increasing importance. One of the things that in talking with my colleagues in other cities we're seeing emerge in labor negotiations is as the percentage of members in labor unions who are subject to PEPRA starts getting closer to 50-50 instead of what it was 20 years ago when the number of PEPRA employees to classic employees was hardly amounted to much. You're seeing increasing pressure to have discussions on what would be labeled as a reform of PEPRA. Yes. So this is, it's not hit the point where in any of the cities that I've talked to, It's become a deal breaker, but it is an increasing level of conversation taking place in the negotiations that we just didn't see a few years ago when it comes. And if I could make a comment on the ESG and all of the politicalization, I'd like to compliment Marcy and the leadership of CalPERS for remaining steadfast in terms of we have a mission to carry out, and that means at times there are going to be those who are pleased because we're holding firm that we should not be divesting from fossil fuels. At other times, there are going to be people who are pleased or displeased based on what they're seeing in the general media. But if there's any takeaway that I've taken away from some of the training that's taken place at the National Association of Corporate Directors, when you have a policy, you need to be firm about why you have that policy, and very firm and consistent in applying those policies. And I think we have been so. The danger would be when we deviate from what our policies have been. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, I appreciate that. And I do appreciate staff always holding as steadfast as possible to our, making sure that we're meeting our hurdle rate, et cetera. I had one quick,
I think we have Jose Luis.
I am aware, I
President
have
Taylor.
one quick other question, which was, I saw the information on voting, elections. And it was from both. We have the retirees who are very engaged, and then the members, active members, who are saying, I'd like to know more. Did we get a flavor of what that is? What's I'd like to know more?
I've been doing research like this for a couple decades. People say that all the time. I would love to get more information, and then they actually turn around and
Oh, I
do
know, I
anything
used
with
to
it, right?
go door to door, so
Yeah,
yeah.
you know. So I think what they're saying is, sure, I'd love to know more about what choices I could be making to vote. But if you look at the participation rates in the elections, I think you're going to be hard-pressed until there's a direct correlation between that and my retirement to get people more active. I think that's what we're seeing from this.
So basically, it's please leave the information and, okay.
Yes,
just-
it's a version of that, and there are other mechanisms which you can communicate, email and a variety of ways that you do talk to members that they'd love to see that in. But I think in the end of the day,
More than we're doing right now, I guess, is what, I'm just trying to figure out how we get them more engaged. And there's a responsibility on the people running, right, to figure that out, but also CalPERS spends a lot of money on that, so.
yeah, the flip side of that is they were hard-pressed to really tell us what they saw.
Okay.
Except for the retired members. I'm sure you're already sending things about the election. They're saying it's coming up, here's who's running. I'm sure that's going out. But other than the retired members, we didn't really hear that they saw it. So, but
Okay.
that sounds pretty familiar to anybody who's worked in any kind of election before.
Got it. All right, Jose Luis, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, President Taylor. Question, first of all, thank you, Ivan, for your work on this. Back on the CalPERS stable and benefit payments threats, mostly hypothetical. When you mean by hypothetical, are they saying are they referring to geopolitical issues, or I'm just trying to understand where is this hypothetical process, because then it brings out, other things, other thoughts that may not. I'm just curious what your thoughts are, please.
So I think there's two factors. One, we got to remember the survey says that the confidence is still really high among all the groups. So this is sort of helping explain what are the places where people are not confident. I think that the quotes on the bottom explain it the best. The first one is, how can you tell me what's going to happen in 30 years? There could be a giant geopolitical event. There could be another recession that impacts my retirement in some way. The other side of that is what we talked about already with this question of politics. How do I know my retirement is really safe from someone coming in and changing the rules, or politics taking over in some way, whether that's reducing the amount in the investment, or it's actually as a rating the fund, right? That's the concern that they're saying. And again, these are hypothetical. They're not saying, I'm seeing that as a threat and I'm concerned. They're saying, no one can guarantee to me that something doesn't happen in 30 years.
Do you think, based on this information, every month I believe we send out the perspective, is that correct, for the members? Is there a way for us to communicate, maybe perhaps enhance our communication on showing the CalPERS is stable, the benefits are being paid. I mean, last year we paid $29.1 billion to our members. You know, that's awesome because we have the funds, we have the cash in hand to do that. Somehow reinforcing that over and over again so that this threat over hypotheticals is more, more tapered down so that it's there. But it's still there, but it's, at least we are making sure that they're getting they're being well informed about the entire process. And I'm just curious if that's something that's a global process or a multifaceted team effort?
Yeah, Mr. Pacheco, I think there is an opportunity, and as I close this out, I want to talk about how we're trying to optimize those emails that we send our members on a monthly basis, because I think it is a powerful tool, and we have some data behind that.
And by doing that, I mean, I've been learning about the new social media things, and I think from certain individuals about like TikTok and all these other media processes, but it seems like people are engaged on videos and so forth just to get the message out. And there might be a way to do that, but I'm just,
Yeah.
it is quite interesting.
So I'm going to volunteer you this for Brad, but I know we've already talked about it. But John has really been restructuring the public affairs team to put more focus on communications going out to our members, balanced effectively with communications to keep our team members engaged as well, and using social media as a way to invite people to get more engaged with their retirement earlier in their careers, because as this survey shows, most people don't really get too engaged with their retirement until they're close to their retirement. The other piece of data that, as we're out talking with employers or members, is the funded status. So when people say, I'm not completely confident because you're only 72% funded, that number is impactful. So as that number increases, and again, I think we can put this chart in that transparency report to show how the funding one is, our projections around funding improvements, that will help as well.
I think that will definitely help. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think, anybody else from the board want to speak?
Yep.
Oh, you do?
Oh, go ahead, Kevin, please.
Kevin.
I was just going to close this out here, but happy to address any questions if we could have
go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking there was a little bit more to this, and I was hoping
I
that
think
may
we're
have
at the end
answered my
here.
question. But, so I can only speak to the last 6 months and the stakeholders that I've met with, and I've been getting a lot of positive. So I want to thank Marcy and the team for creating that atmosphere for those stakeholders to get those positive responses. A lot of the contacts that I've received were specific to answering questions, and when we were able to point them out on the website, the excitement that they were able to see their specific question answered on the website gave them a little bit of celebrity status, I think. So thank you for doing that. Looking at the research and the comments, every time there's a comment, we always expect there to be some sort of biased response. Is there metrics in place that sort of filter out some of those biased responses so we can look at things in an objective manner when we look at improving services and things of that sort?
I can't take direct responsibility for the survey part of it, but what I can tell you is when you're dealing with response rates at that level, there is a challenge of who is responding, right? You think about what's driving people to tell you what they think and those that didn't tell you what they think. So there's certainly some inherent bias in who is coming in, but it's not an invalid perspective to look at the survey results and say, we're confident in what we're hearing here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think what, it's sort of a twin challenge. If they're not going to get involved in the elections, then the question becomes, how do you get them to get involved in what they think about? The other way to look at this is to say, they're really supremely confident in what you're doing, and they like what you're doing, and therefore they didn't bother to respond to the survey, right? That's one way to look at it. And what we're hearing, the positivity of the responses here would suggest that that's the case. But without them responding, we can't be sure if that's really what's happening. So, the flip side of this is you think about the focus group participation. And we heard some negative comments in there, but remember, this is reflective of a 80% satisfaction in most cases, even higher in some other cases. So we are in fact looking at what's the room to improve here, and that's who we're hearing from in the focus groups.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps answer some of your questions. So yes, we can sort of work with that, but not entirely.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, because I think hearing positives from one group, hearing negatives for another group, it sort of brings up the question, how do we make an even playing field for all stakeholders, right? So thank you, yeah.
Just to recap that, I would say these are all room for improvement, right? That's what we could be doing that will help.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. Brad?
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, if we can have the last two slides. Or actually, I'll move to the final slide just to want to make sure the board's aware of some of the work that we're going to be doing in this next year to address some of the comments that you're hearing. So I think, Kevin, you said it best, this is always a work in progress in terms of needing to adapt to the environment and technology and the needs of our stakeholders. We're never going to receive a perfect report card, but our team's committed to meeting and exceeding the expectations of our members and employers. As Sabrina Hutchins mentioned yesterday, stakeholder engagement is part of our 5-year strategic plan. It's been elevated to a strategic goal, so it will be our priority over the next 4 years. There are a couple initiatives that we have this year in terms of enhancing communication for our members, and one of them is to refresh our website. We have made incremental changes over the last few years, but it is a site that's 10 years old, and Stevenson can probably say in the technology world it's probably like a dinosaur, but it serves its purpose, but we want to make sure that our members are able to find information as easily as possible. And we're talking to our investment office about how we can spotlight and share the work they're doing to help reach a distinct and target audience that they're trying to reach. Because our website is a really member-employer-centric website. We do have investment information out there, and I think it can be differentiated for all parties. As I mentioned, and Jose Luis brought this up, we're implementing new tools to optimize the communication that we're sending our members, and this is really the email communication. So we do send our monthly perspective newsletter to our members. And you should know that the average open rate for email communication across industries is about 20%. Ours repeatedly exceeds 35 to 40%. So it's a really powerful tool, and John Myers and the public affairs team are working to focus on telling the CalPERS story better and more often. And then, based on the findings, there continues to be a need to provide more education around sustainability and our diversity work to ensure the members have a clear understanding. This is really not about politics. This is about our fiduciary duty. Ms. Middleton brought this up. I think since the survey was administered, we've done a lot of work in this area. Hopefully you've seen that Ms. Frost has been out speaking on this topic regularly, and we're getting really favorable press around the work that we're doing in ESG. And I think the last effort that I'll highlight, and we're finding this already in the work that we're doing with our IT team around user experience of our website, and that's just trying to speak to our members in a language that they can understand. And this is not unique to CalPERS. This is something state agencies deal with. They have a love-hate relationship with jargon. We've already found this to be true in the testing, and we just need to find a way to speak to our members in a language that they understand and that they're able to ask questions, because oftentimes some of these inconsistencies that have been mentioned are not the fault of our contact center agents or our members. It's just sometimes they don't know what they're asking for, because it's just so complex. And if we could simplify that for them, it'll be much easier. So with that, I'll just close us out, and we'll follow up with some of the information that's been requested, and we just thank you for your time.
Brad, I do have one more question from Director Walker.
Thank you. Not a question, but just a comment. I, for one, and I'm new to the board, but I really appreciate the focus groups only because there was no surprise there. you know, I mean, so it was like, so for me, when I look at things like that, it's always good that you don't get surprised. And so a lot of the comments made sense. And then I wanted to ask, because if it's email, right, what is do we have good email addresses, and what is the error rate, and how do we account for that? Because that could be some of why we don't get responses.
So we don't have every member's email.
Right.
We probably have, I'm looking back at John Myers there, I think about 700,000 email addresses roughly of our members. And it's, you know, it's an effort that we have underway to try to collect emails. It's something that's inputted if they have a CalPERS account.
Right.
And, but in terms of the validity of the emails, I think it's pretty consistent. We do have some opt-outs. People can opt out of the newsletter if they wish. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Kinda. So, what was our general overall participation rate? So for active retirees and employers?
So for this, not for the focus groups, but
But for the survey.
for the online survey, it was roughly 6%.
Okay, so
Which-
that's just above where it would not be relevant, right? It's like under 5%, then it's not relevant?
Yeah, this is low this year. We did struggle to have people take the survey in the past. We've been around 9%, so we do want to strive to get higher. And I think, you know, we have a good partnership with EMC Research now, and we can look to see how they can help us provide that in the future.
Okay.
Yep.
I do. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
So I know Irena mentioned this too. It could be cyclical in contact center, you know, wait times and call handling. So Kim just sent me a dashboard that she gets every day. So let's just compare Tuesday, July 18th to the former Tuesday. So this week there were 3,700 calls, 3,765. Last Tuesday there were 4,703. We met our service level at 82% this week, 17.5% the prior week. The average wait time on July 18th was 1 minute 48 seconds. Last Tuesday it was 10 minutes 28 seconds. Wow. The abandon rate, which means the people who, after getting through some of the, you know, the phone tree, decided to drop the call, that was 3.8% on July 18th, 17% last Tuesday. Calls answered, again, I mentioned that one. Average handle time, so the call duration on July 18th was just over 8 minutes, 8.5 minutes. Same on last Tuesday. And then the available agents, so Tuesday, July 18th, 119 agents available. Tuesday prior to that, 116 agents available. So we have these dashboards that get sent out to management so that we have that daily activity and a determination or a decision about, one, is there the availability of additional resources to staff unacceptable wait times. I think for the most part, you know, the 10-minute wait time, we also have that option in our phone tree to get a return call. So, you know, for people who don't want to wait for that 10 minutes, we will have the ability, or we do have the ability to call them back, called an outbound call. But anyway, that's just a little snapshot of the last 2 weeks.
I'm sorry. Sounds like that extra 1,000 calls made a bit of a difference in the everything. So I appreciate that. So anybody else? Oh, Jose Luis, go ahead. And Frank.
I just want to ask Mr. Pacheco on regarding the survey. You said 6% overall rate, right? And with respect to the members, now when we send out the survey, do we send it out randomly, or do we send them out to? I mean, how is it done? First of all, if you can just ask that. That's my first part of the question. Mm-hmm. And my second question is, if we do send it out randomly, does the survey have an option where it's not only, I mean, I'm assuming that it's in English, but does it have an option to translate to like Spanish or to some other language that could be the same? We get the same kind of information, but it would be in in a language that perhaps a member may be more comfortable responding to. So if you can elaborate a little bit further on that, thank you.
Sure. So in answer to your first question, it's a random selection of members that we pull from the database, both active and retirees. The only specific emails and individuals that we send it to are those more defined lists of employers, senior leaders, or the stakeholder leaders. If memory serves me correct, there isn't a way in the survey to automatically translate it. Now, a member might take that on their own to do it through a Google Translator, but it is something that we can look at in terms of making it easy for it to translate into another language.
Yeah, that would be, I mean, I think that, I don't know if it may perhaps increase the response rate. I mean, given the demographics of our state becoming more and more diverse, and our members are very, very diverse, so perhaps, I don't know, but I think it's something that perhaps could be explored, just a generality.
Sure, and just to kind of give you the rough numbers, so it was sent out to 72,000 active members and 23,000 retirees.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
So, and I don't know, I know it's a waste of money if we're not getting a huge return rate, but would it be better to just send it out to everyone and see if we get a better return rate? Or is that not how that works?
It's not typically done that way because it's such a large list to send to. That,
Right.
I mean, you know, we're reaching the point of overwhelming the system if you do it that way. So we usually do a sample selection, but you know, knowing what I know about how this is conducted, there's other ways that you can incentivize people to participate. That's happening across the industry now.
Yeah, we
right?
did that for something else, so yeah. Okay. Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Real quick, I wanted to, first of all, ditto the congratulations and the thanks to the team, you know, to Jan and Brad and the public affair team. This is obviously really good feedback and good work. Just a quick comment, more than a question, regarding your last slide that is still there, page 14, opportunities. And I'm not trying to imply that one opportunity is better than the other, so I'm not prioritized. But I want to put emphasis on the last bullet. Continue to advocate the value of defined benefit plans. Multiple reasons, So number one, and which is a lifelong mission, I am a very, very proud public servant for 38 years. I would not change that career for any other CEO jobs or any other jobs. I'm a proud public servant. And to instill that, especially with our younger generation, as a public servant, we also understand that we made a pledge to poverty in our career, and it's okay. It's okay. That's okay. But we do have one value. We do have something that I think all of us aspire to, and that is that defined benefit plan, which ultimately it's a win-win. Win-win for CalPERS. I'm not trying to be their recruiter, but certainly, certainly that could be helpful. But more important for our pension, we need those youngsters. We need more public servants to come and support. After 30 years, pretty soon, I'm going to be taking on that pension, and I want to make sure that we got some people behind us that can continue that tradition. So anyhow, my comment in essence is I just like to see, and I want to commend you, not just to continue, but a strong message and defend, because as you know, as you all know, we've been in this battle about defined benefit plan for quite a bit. And that we cannot take it for granted, and we need to continue to defend it. We need to continue to show the value. We need to make sure that we overly emphasize the value and not just emphasize. Thank you, Madam President.
Mr. Rufino, thank you very much. Gentlemen, we want to thank you. These were great. It stirred up a lot of conversation. I'm going to have a conversation with Kim about customer service. A good one, not a bad one. Before you all leave, we do have 3 commenters. So I'm going to start with Margaret Brown. And then I have J.J. Jelensink and Rosemary Knox. You guys got 3 minutes. Margaret, go ahead.
I'll try and talk fast. Margaret Brown, retired retiree, active member of RPEA. So I have a lot of notes here. First of all, I appreciate that we're going to be able to get the research data from the focus groups. I was not part of the focus group, so let me just give you my comments now. I really think, and a lot of the retirees think, since you don't have everybody's email, people don't reply, we'd like to see some of these surveys done via mail, maybe even a postcard. I'm not exactly certain how you get to them, but more people would participate if you did it via mail. I know there's a cost involved, but if you've got a commitment to stakeholders, especially retirees, then you're going to have to use paper. I'm sorry, that's just how some of us are. Not me, but some of us are. I do appreciate Mr. Pacheco raising the issue about asking about why the concerns are hypothetical, and I was going to explain to you, the researcher, that they are not hypothetical when the funded status is at 72%, and Marcy finally got to that answer as I'm sort of flashing 72%. That is not hypothetical, and that is concerning for retirees. And then my other comment is the website needs to be more searchable. When I was on the board and I had Diligent, I could find anything. And when you try to use the website, it's very, very complicated and the results don't come up. You have to basically remember, I have like a little log of how I got and found information. So if you're fixing that, I think that's wonderful, and that will really help members. And then when you, slide 14, when you had up there, and you talked about, the very last one was to advocate the value of defined benefit plans, but just above it you talked about promoting ESG and DEI, and you spent all day on that on Monday, and very little of it was about the value of it, how it's going to bring better returns. And that's why you get the problems with politics, because it sounds like this board is involved in politics as opposed to bringing in better returns. And so you've got to make the Monday session focused on both. And if you don't do it, you're going to continue to have low results. The last thing, and I know you're going to tell me I'm out of time, you shortened the survey, you eliminated low value questions. I wasn't sure what you meant by low value, because remember, I'm glass half empty, and that was the low value, was it something that drove your score down? Or by low value, what did you mean? And that's my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Brown. Maybe a low value isn't the right term, but there were some questions added to the survey over time that were tied to metrics in our previous 5-year strategic plan. So we eliminated those because they were just not necessary, or we didn't need those at that time. So those were the questions.
Jelensic, go ahead.
JJ Jelensic, a observation and then a question. On page 3 of your, Brad, on page 3 of your presentation, you talked about the environment. And I think it's important that people take that into context, because if this survey had happened in the last month, you would get a very different set of responses, particularly from the retirees. So the environment is important. And then on page 11, you talked about there was a breakdown of the employer groups that people were from. Did that include the retirees, because they obviously retired from one of those groups, or was that based on just the actives?
That would include the retirees. So if they identified themselves as a former state employee, that would be in there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jelensic. Ms. Knox?
Hi, Rosemary Knox, retiree. I also have a question regarding your presentation, but thank you. It's very informative and it's very enlightening. But one of the aspects that I'm looking at, are you confident that your retirement money is safe in regards to the members? You answered the question that I had. You had a survey that went out to 23,000 retirees and I don't know how many actives. But there's a psychological component to this issue in regards to retirees. And I don't see a breakdown by age in the responses in regards to, is my retirement safe? Because if I'm an active employee, I'm not going to worry about it. But if I'm retired, I have 100 gazillion questions regarding, is my pension safe? And I don't see the breakdown. And so I would appreciate it if you would break it down by age.
Thank you, Ms. Knox. Okay, so that ends our open session board meeting. We are going to do an approval to meet in closed session. Hold on a second. Pursuant to Government Code Sections C-18A. So before we adjourn into closed session, the board needs to approve meeting in closed session for the information excuse me, folks. Can you guys please be quiet? Thank you. Before we adjourn into closed session, the board needs to approve meeting in closed session for the information security update and cybersecurity briefing. The Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act requires at least 2/3 of the board members present to vote approval in order to hold closed session to consider matters posing a potential threat of criminal activity against CalPERS, property or equipment, including electronic data, where disclosure would compromise CalPERS security. Based on consultation with our legal office, discussion concerning CalPERS information security, cybersecurity qualifies for this closed session exception. After the closed session, the board will briefly report out in open session that we met under this exception and if any action was taken. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move approval.
It has been moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Mr. Palkey. All those in favor of meeting in closed session, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, any abstentions? All right, we will be meeting in closed session at 11 a.m. because we need to take a break, I think, and check out. So I want to thank everybody who attended. Thank you all and our stakeholders for coming. Have a nice rest of the month, guys. you driving?
I'm riding.
We're good? All right, everybody, we are back in open session. The board met in closed session today pursuant to Government Code Section 11126, Subdivision C 18A. During the closed session, the board did receive information on our information security update and cybersecurity briefing on staff's work to protect the system, and the board took no action. I'm adjourning our open session. Thanks everyone for coming, and safe travels back to wherever you're going. Thank you.